All right. Hello, everyone. My name's Sam Rice. This is my presentation over my SIA, which was for a proposed nuclear power station in South Africa, specifically in the location of Thyspunt. So, for some background, the report that I'm analyzing initially takes three locations into consideration. We have one, like I mentioned, that I'm focusing on is Thyspunt, but there's two others. Um, I don't really know how to pronounce the names of them, so I'm not even going to try. But they're all within the Eastern Cape of South Africa. So this report is analyzing social impacts established which with each of them. So I chose one of them to focus on. But some background for the proposed project: it's for a nuclear power station in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. Um, the station is up to 4,000 megawatts per hour capacity, which is pretty high demand for power overall. And the report kind of outlines the entire life cycle of the project. So that could be from the planning to the construction to building the infrastructure needed for access to the facility and construction overall, implementation and decommission. And I thought it was important to note that it does follow and comply with the regulations of South Africa's National Environmental Management Act of 1998. And that just establishes a form of environmental governance for principles for decision making on anything affecting the environment. Yeah, so Thyspunt itself was chosen as one of the three due to its optimal location and proximity to the coastline. This is important for a nuclear station because it needs a lot of water to cool the reactors. And I'll show where Thyspunt is, I think in the next slide here. Yeah. Yeah, so this is from Google Maps. This is, like I said, the Eastern Cape of South Africa. So South Africa, picture the very bottom of the continent of Africa. Thyspunt would be around here. It's between the Cape St. Francis and over here is like Oyster Bay. So it's a very small community, a very rural community where it's being proposed and located. And we'll kind of talk more about that. The reporter kind of mentions that within the analysis a couple times. Some background on the assessor. His name is Alwyn Dippenaar, I believe. He's from South Africa. All of his education and experiences within South Africa. I believe he attended the University of South Africa, um, and has a ton of social work experience. He has some background in planning, public involvement and engagement, and other social science fields, such as sociology, management. I got to find his resume uh, for when the consultants were, or the company was hiring consultants for this project. And he has a lot of experience in rural foundations management throughout many different provinces within South Africa. So I thought that was cool. And just by the way, the consultant is Octagonal Development. So at the time, Alan was working for Octagonal Development, and they were hired by this company named Eskom's Holding, who I believe was in charge of all the engineering and construction of the plant. So yeah, just a little bit of background there. So to start, the report analyzes a ton of existing conditions of each of the three locations. Existing conditions just being meaning like, population, current population, infrastructure, healthcare access, kind of all that background data of a community. And within the report, this is all quantitative, um, which makes a lot of sense because it's a lot of hard data. Um, so the presenter, yeah, he presents a lot of quantitative data. And like I said, it includes prominent industries within the region, overall land use, future land use, existing land use, tourism, population, housing, agriculture, all of that. He uses assessment tables and matrices to organize the data, which I thought was very appropriate. Burge talks about how data should be cumulative within like a matrix or a matrix table. So I thought that was good on his part. One critique I had within the existing conditions background is that his main source of data was from census data from 2001, along with other like local government studies and reports, and subconsultant source data, which those last two are totally appropriate and fine. I just believed that 2001 was kind of outdated. A lot of characteristics could have changed within the community, but he does explain this within the report, and he mentions that it is a bit outdated. So it's good that he considered that, but considering that it was conducted within 2015, or that's when it was published, I would have liked to see some more updated data. But I know that there are some information gaps which he outlines, which is good there. But yeah, as far as the SIA impact methodology, so we have the existing conditions for each three, and then we get into the social impacts that are assessed for each one. So there's a list of about 17 that he outlines. Um, and for this, he uses a mix of quantitative and qualitative data. Kind of to assess these, he arranges them via this list of different characteristics of them. So nature, extent, duration, intensity, consequence, probability, significance, reversibility, irreplaceability, and confidence. So for each impact, for example, influx of construction workers as an impact due to the project, he would arrange the impacts via these, I think eight or nine, which I'll show you in just a minute. So yeah, he uses another matrix to outline these within the construction phase and operational phase, and this is measuring them without any level of mitigation, and that just means he provides mitigation strategies and optimization strategies on uh, actions to do to prevent any extreme consequences from the impacts outlined. So yeah, that's a bit confusing, but I'll explain it here. Yeah. So here's what it kind of looks like. This is for the impact for creation of employment opportunities. So here he's analyzing how the project will create new employment opportunities. So without optimization, without the optimization measures that he outlines, without plan or essentially without planning for this, um, these are the impacts in the construction phase and operational phase. So you'll see, yeah, consequence high. Uh, he does high, medium, low, local effects, etc. So I thought that this was helpful. He does this for every impact, and yeah, I think that it provides a good analysis of the severity of the impacts, and yeah, I'll get more into the critiques on them, but initially, I think that within the list, he focuses too much on economic impacts and not on more micro, like community, institutional, family level impacts. But I'll get more into that. So taking a look further into the impacts that he outlines, like I just mentioned, he has a large focus on population impacts along with infrastructure, the more economic side, and strays a bit from the more social side of the impact analysis, which was a main critique for me as well. Um, yeah, I think that Burge mentions a lot um, about the need for a well-rounded social impact assessment that considers more than just economic impacts, as economic impacts are kind of like the more tangible, quantitative ways to analyze. I think within the report, I think these could have maybe social impacts could have maybe been more highlighted. So, like I said, there's about 17, including like physical health, influx of jobs or loss of jobs post-construction, the associated infrastructure for the project needed, and how that might affect the environment, creation of new jobs, potential nuclear disasters, and more. Um, and yeah, they're analyzed if there are no optimization or mitigation methods enacted or included. And um, right below the analysis, like I just exampled here, he outlines optimization or mitigation methods that largely uh, try to explain or give recommendations for how to combat some of the impacts. And a lot of these tie into creation of new policies or um, help from the local government in order to mitigate the damages. So yeah, actually, here's the list of 17. You can see we start with a lot of kind of like the construction phase. So influx of job seekers for construction, and because of that, kind of the effects that'll come in, like the access to municipal services, health impacts, and then kind of as it's implemented, visual impacts, impacts their sense of place, etc. And I would say within these, the last like 8 or so, um, the report ties in a lot of the public engagement, public comments that were collected. So, kind of going into that, I wanted to tie in monitoring, mitigation, and the public involvement process. As I mentioned, public involvement is kind of tied in throughout. When he's analyzing each impact, he includes verbatim comments on, what the public has been saying about how it may affect, visual impacts, the loss of sense of place. As I said, it's a very rural area, and kind of having a nuclear power plant there it would it would change a lot of characteristics as in terms of sense of place. Yeah, as far as mitigation process and monitoring isn't overtly outlined for every impact, more as reinforced within the mitigation process. So, in within a mitigation recommendation that the author outlines, it'll kind of tie in a monitoring process. So, like I mentioned, a lot of the mitigation characteristics tie in a creation of new policies or programs to monitor impacts. So, for example, impact of a potential nuclear disaster. Um, the author kind of reinforces public engagement within this, as he suggests a community-focused exercise to distribute public information, collect public information on the social impacts and fears associated with that. So we can see that this is kind of a recommendation of of the impacts of like a potential nuclear disaster, how to mitigate some of this fear within the community by bonding the community a bit more, which adheres to a key principle within the SIA guidelines, to involve agencies and stakeholders in the communities, which I thought was awesome. And by including the comments throughout the report, I think that gives a good representation of what the community is feeling as well. Uh, I would like to see how they kind of implemented this within the project, because they mentioned a lot of those comments were made in throughout 2009 and 2010 from a series of like workshops and outreach. Although the report was finished in 2015, and I believe they mentioned they had another round of engagement for the draft, the overall draft. But yeah, so as far as monitoring, however, there's no like universal monitoring system that he outlines, which I thought was probably the main critique within the whole report. Um, it's more as just a suggestion within some of the mitigation recommendations. Like he's saying, like, oh, to solve this issue or to mitigate this problem, um, let's involve the community into a new program where they can monitor the impacts. But that's only for a couple of the impacts, and it's not really a key component of the report, and it wasn't established within the scope as well, which is another big thing. That's kind of crucial to SIA reporting overall. Um, yeah, and a lot of the mitigation recommendations, I thought they called back to local planning and previous government documents and plans. So it'd be like, for example, the health impacts. Oh, to solve these health impacts, um, include or like improve on planning practices overall, and follow instructions from whatever community plan was already established for health guidelines. I thought this was kind of general, and I don't know. I think it was probably appropriate within this case, but the author doesn't really outline any like specific recommendations on like tangible ways to solve the problem. He just kind of says we need to involve more local government and utilize the plans and documents we've already been using, which is fine, but I'd like to see a more specialized approach. Kind of. Here's kind of the example here. Involve authorities and local municipalities, Department of Health, for any additional needs. Proper planning processes should be followed. Yeah, I think it's just kind of general overall. Yeah. Final thoughts. I gave it an overall score of a B. Like I said, he needs a universal monitoring process. Mitigation recommendations are relevant and practical, but are practical and not specialized, I think, to some of the impacts. And I think public involvement is done pretty well. And as far as the impacts he outlined, I think he did a good job. It gives a broad array, but more a larger focus on the social impacts, kind of more like micro family level impacts of how this project might impact uh, day-to-day social life within the more rural community could be good. Um, and adheres mostly to the national principle or international principles, but doesn't really outline anything on the last two, which talk about the irreversible impacts of construction and implementation. I don't know if that's just because there wasn't solidified enough solidified data to say so, or something else. But yeah, overall, I think the report is well made and gives a good perspective on what decision makers can do to kind of mitigate overall impacts of construction of this project and select the right one. So, yep, that's about it. Thanks, everyone.